first part. Patrick's CDs, by the way, are available online. Google him, Patrick Wolf with two Fs. I'm Cecil Giscombe. I teach poetry here, and I'm pleased to be able to welcome Rae Armantrout to the Holloway Poetry Series. And pleased as well to welcome our second reader, our first reader rather, Rachel Beck from our graduate program. Lise Gaston will introduce Rae Armantrout as the second reader. I'll say a couple of very quick words about Rachel. She is Charity?
I'm here, but you can say words.
Oh, okay, we couldn't find you. I'm happy to introduce Charity Kett, who will introduce Rachel Beck.
He was right over there. Okay. Is that what it is? I have no idea. Okay. If I just stand right here.
You stand right there and try talking to it from the distance. Respectful distance.
Hello. Seems okay.
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 From voice. Can you hear her?
Can you hear me?
Back there?
In the back?
Say a few things.
A few things. Hello. Can you hear the person with the person with his hand up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Okay. All right. On a hot day this fall, while we were walking up a very steep fire trail, Rachel explained to me that one might, for example, in the case of Emily Dickinson, think of the term post-narrative as describing the place where a narrative has been. As I remember this conversation, we were looking at a plume of airplane exhaust spreading out and growing indistinct. Although I don't know that she would accept the characterization, I would describe Rachel's poetry as having the intensity of the phrase, the place where a narrative has been, as being full of the same reticence and expansiveness, and as having the same attention to receding effects. In one of my favorite poems of hers, Rachel writes, "So much we can't know about each other, yet I know your sun-warmed skin. I know the glee you show in rolling on a dead thing." The poem is about a dog and about the power of communion and intimacy despite essential distances, whether special or familial. Rachel writes about what can be known in the first place, not just about another, but about a never fully private self that is also full of receding effects. Many, perhaps all of her poems emerge under a set of formal constraints, which is to say that their resourceful energy and tact is also a response to structuring. This is brief, but I'll close now with an abbreviated list of her poetic accomplishments. Before coming to Berkeley, Rachel received an MFA from the Iowa Writers' Workshop. She's been awarded a Paul Engel Fellowship and the Eisner Prize in Poetry. She's published in numerous journals, including Vault, Calyx, and the Wallace Stevens Journal. She also has 2 new poetry manuscripts, which I hope to see in print very soon. Please welcome Rachel.
Hello, I'm going to try not to set off the feedback. So the first best thing about reading here tonight is getting to read with Rae Armantrout, who I've been a fan of for years. The second best thing is that I get to drink water. In the Mod 5 room, no less. So I got interested in the Oxford English Dictionary's 100 most common lemmas. Anybody seen this? A lemma is a word and all the forms of that word. So if it's a noun, it would include the plurals. If it's a verb, it would include all the verb forms. And they've got a list of the 100 most frequently used in English. And I wondered, because I'm stylistically a magpie at heart and have never met a 5-syllable word I don't like, what would happen if I have to limit myself to the 100 most commonly used words in the English language? What can I do with a speech that is plainer than Robert Frost? So stripped back, our language still offers us opportunities to talk about desire, time, attention, obsession, all the essentials of human interaction and family, chosen or not. How can there be a because with no? Say they all use their time well. Say they all like some people other than you. Say their first work will be to take what they can get. Say you want a new us. Say they come in. So, what then? Some good could come of it. Come back and use me after. When can we make time to see how I will even take some people into your good time? Now look at what I have and have not. Give us this day our come on over as you do. But what do I know? I am not, as of now, up for it. Just no. I can make no time with any other as you do, but what, I think, what do you want? How can I be what you want? If only they all look at you most of the year, if only I look like, if only I give like, if only you come back after. Work on this first. Can I be other than I? Then on this, do you want me to go? The two books that I'm working on both started with a prolonged Oulipo bender. Oulipo, for anyone who doesn't know, is an acronym for, a French acronym for Workshop of Potential Literature. This is a mostly French collective of very mathy and sciencey people who try to write poems based on constraint problems. This particular poem, and one other that I'll read tonight, is called A Beautiful Outlaw. It's a variation on an acrostic, but where in an acrostic, the first letter of the dedicatee's name would give you the first line, the beginning of the first line, and the second line, etc. In A Beautiful Outlaw, you are restricted from using the letters of the beloved. Full. A cup of coffee left out to oxidize. That's how opaque those bittering eyes. If ever there was light in them, it preceded me, flew off on its broomstick without tail, trail, history. Without even a snail's snotted path to show its momentum or residence in an angry god's hands, where of course we all are. I have worn myself out looking for it. If your life's work is hiding, I no longer seek what doesn't want to be known. The best that humans do on their own steam, you said, only rends the world faster. We are such great butchers. I thought that once, twice even. Now I want out of your we. Don't want to rend the world, fast or slow? Drop your sword, your nunchucks, uranium, your fists of forethought. Don't tell me you'll give me something to cry about. I'm peeling your hands off my face. This is a poem about accepting an apology without the actual apology. It's called Don't Mention It. Nothing unusual happened. I must have done something terrible. I have never felt anything but safe and loved. He hardly ever hit me. No harm, no foul. I've been a bit overdramatic. Lots of people had it worse. I don't remember it anyway. No worries. I'm sure I could have been an easier child. No one knows what burden another human is carrying. He grew up in a time when men yelled instead of feeling things. You must have been so afraid to parent by yourself. Lord knows I couldn't have done it better. What does the word normal even mean? No, I didn't imagine running off to join a pack of wolves. I'm doing fine. You must have been so afraid to lose the people who know you best. I was very happy. Just look at how I'm smiling in the pictures. If the bass were still out, I would ask for help on this next one. But in Western music, one of the basic units of harmony is called the triad. If you take out the middle of the triad, you have what's called an open fifth. It's neither major nor minor. And it sounds like this. This is Schrödinger's triad. The open fifth is the empty fifth. The open fifth is a hollow wind chime no one else hears. The open fifth has nothing to give it mood. It is Copeland. It is plain chant. It is the start of all Suzuki concerts. It is an establishing shot that establishes nothing. The open fifth is hollow, not restless but resigned, not the night of crying, but the morning after. The open fifth can't tell if it is whiskey or bourbon and doesn't remember what's the difference anyway. The open fifth is the start of stone fruit season. The open fifth is a column of volunteers who spread like morning glories, exploding themselves on the way to market. The open fifth is the sound of undigested knowledge. The open fifth is the sun rising with the sharpness of a blade and the color of fog. The open fifth is a raptor contemplating a field mouse. It keeps its 5 options open. All manner of things have fallen out of an open fifth: vocal warm-ups, jazz, car alarms, the names nobody calls you. The open fifth causes coughing to those who try to down it quickly. Coeur d'Alene is an open fifth, the clear, clear water and the skinheads bathing in it. Is it good or bad? Very. The open fifth narrows to fit in a funnel, in a bird's young mouth calling for provisions. The open fifth goes forth, but sometimes stirred. The open fifth is a steadily evaporating fifth. It is the sound of a train whistling for the hell of it. It is going nowhere. Two things you need to know about the next poem. The first is that it has 2 speakers. The second is that it quotes from the biblical book of Ruth. Problems of perspective. Whither thou goest, shall I also go. Why are you following me? I had an urge to write a one-liner. So, this is another beautiful outlaw for my partner, Blake. And it contains some horrendous puns on the words beautiful outlaw. It's called You Fit, You Wit, You. You look like shoeless reason on the slippy floor, waxing rhapsodic out of your stems, moves filched, but who's counting? Everything's up for grabs, ourselves included, slap bass funk of hard ardor. Oh, photogenic Route 1 robber, do you see now why I've never signed a missive, yours? Why I've never termed you my, never mind the noun? To be the washed dust of which the sky smells today, absent an owner's tag, takes practice. What pledges are there after the having held kind fall away? O delicious thistle, may we be traveling burrs who pull apart to meet in sun and shadow, uphill and down, with no regard for weather. Any undergraduates in the room tonight? You know the word anaphora? Yay, okay. So, if you want an example of anaphora, here you go. This is called Impossible Gifts. I want to give you a book of smart answers to dumb questions. I want to give you a helmet with wings for your ride across the desert. Now that you have a feather for your cap, I want to give you a whole cap made of feathers. I want to give you the firework of your choice. I want to give you a key change. I want to give you a torch song that will change your mind about vocal jazz. I want to give you a whole Christmas with no fart jokes. I want to give you a blueberry bush growing at eye level. I want to give you a cat tail to wrap around your arm when you're feeling pensive. I want to give you a wander alone in company to a pair of dogs, also a pair of dimes, though it's not enough to make a phone call. I want to give you a palm-sized carnival with self-assembling rides. I want to give you a map of your insides so you can see how they fit together. I want to give you a sealed letter that answers your deepest questions, which you can open or not. I want to give you a baseball. I don't know why, since you don't play baseball, but then I think, maybe you don't play baseball because you don't have a baseball. I want to give you a universe and time and the tools to make them act on each other. I want to give you the time of your life, but it already scrolls out before and behind you. I want to conclude with the poem that Charity mentioned, for all the lovers of dogs in the room. In contravention of the rules of literature and good taste, there is a talking dog in this poem. And since you can't see the italics, you're going to have the fun of figuring out when it's speaking. This is called Talking to Dog. Peaceably on the floor with you, how undusted and close to the ground we are. I shed as you do, though not as fast or excitably. I have never startled at my hair as if it were a rabbit turned tail and come for me. An odd kinship over what? Both having spines, warm blood? Surely food binds you to my side, but I like to think that it's devotion, that you smell the sad on my breath, that your tongue offers what comfort it can, instead of trying me for salt. Easy to make up stories about your head in my lap, that you knew I'd like that when I didn't know myself, that you observe more keenly than a human does, that you can tell hawk from handsaw no matter what the wind. Easy to tell a story, too, about my hands. I am lowering my blood pressure by stroking you. I am bonding. Why mystify biochemistry or mutual using? But these words tell me nothing about my face at your flank, here to build what? Each other. The world will throw what it throws, and we will fetch it back. I will shatter when you shudder still under a syringe in the ravages of age. Will seek comfort in the hair of the dog, reminders of you turning up in the lint filter. The story is no less real for all its explanations. You come to me when I call you, at least if there's nothing more fascinating streaking the yard, rodential ambush. You pile on me when I'm dog-tired, and I wonder, feeling your twitches, if you're piled in dreamland on your sleeping siblings. So much we can't know about each other, yet I know your sun-warmed skin. I know the glee you show in rolling on a dead thing. That night when we played cards and you showed me with one paw what my life would be, morning turned into morning. Did I dream that? Thy elbow, thy lap, my dwelling places, thou hast the opposable thumbs and house keys, though I know better the pleasures of a lactic foot and all the shortcuts home. Let us thus divide our labors in the cool of the day. I watch you track the crows amassing overhead, bird and the blank space between in interlocking wedges, swelling toward us in a way. I want so much to see through your eyes. Yet I do not know you as a littermate who speaks your species does, nor as a squirrel gauges the free spring of your legs, nor as the neighbor sheltie knows the texture of your ankle and how it tastes when nipped, not even as the crows who, wheeling, watch your watching. But I do know excited from alarmed. I know you eat raspberries off the cane. Sometimes you run so hard you bounce off the fence, little grasses shredding in your wake. I know what in you looks like joy, a huffing sigh when the cool air cycles at your belly. How your dog brows twitch now as I talk to you, how the world to you is sent and present. In you, I hold what I cannot fully know. I ask you who I am alone. You aren't. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And now, Lise Gaston will introduce Rae Armantrout.
Wary of this. Hopefully I won't set it up. It is my great pleasure to introduce Rae Armantrout. When I was a student back in Montreal, struggling through a master's thesis in poetry, my supervisor recommended I read Versed. I might not be pronouncing that title right, but this book would be a finalist for the National Book Award, a National Book Critics Circle Award winner, and win the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 2010. I can't remember now his stated reasons for giving me Rae Armantrout's work, but on returning to it since, I have been able to venture a few guesses. Whereas my poems had, perhaps I should say, still have, a tendency to round off, to try and answer the questions posed by their confined little worlds, Armantrout's work, as many of you here know quite well, denies any such simple view or scope. If she notes our human desires for the answers, it is to show the structural impossibility of such a position. Fact, Verst's final poem, ends, "Each material fact is a pose, an answer waiting to be chosen. Just so," it says, "ask again." The assumed materiality of fact is instead shown to inhabit the temporal tenuousness of a pose, while our desire for response echoes out onto itself. Is this echo celebratory? Or does that final exclamation point that closes the line offer a challenge? No answer we choose can be final. Critics have described Rae Armantrout's work as poems under pressure that know life by isolating it from narrative. In her poem Evidence, the speaker may agree, as she declares that she is offering a window to the world. Believe it? Look at these convincing shards. These poems perform internal arguments, not the equation, but the friendship between solving and dissolving. To quote the poem The Ether, each sentence is both an acquiescence and a dismissal. To quote Rae Armantrout again, mine is a poetics of the double take, the crossroads. Call it resting in doubt, call it negative capability, that comfortable with uncertainty we all learn, or don't, because these poems also acknowledge and perform the discomfort that accompanies uncertainty, the actual lack of rest. As in the poem Home, which says, "In truth, stillness kills us. We depend on the restlessness of all that we don't see for warmth." The restlessness of what we don't see reminds us that these are poems that know how to play with space, not just visually or orally in the pauses asked for by line breaks, but conceptually. These poems make room for silence in their broader opening up of thought, a space awash in possibility, or the very irony of such a claim. They couple a captivating elusiveness of referent with the reassuring clarity of syntax. These poems are explorations of language as language, what it can do when given some room. The refusal of certainty is in no way the refusal of beauty when it comes. The title poem from the collection itself begins, "I work it until sweetness rises of itself, then arcs across unfurling petals and is gone." The rich, even decadent tonal quality of this passage is, however, momentary, as beauty is. Poems often leave us in the middle of a phrase, as if these narrow, shady steps, lined with well-trimmed bushes, lead nowhere. As the quotations I've given no doubt show, there are many movements in these poems that speak to the craft, the form, the aesthetics of thought. Perhaps we are invited to read Armantrout's recurrent style of short, edible lines in the same way she describes how a string of raindrops dangling from an iron bar reveals opportunities for clarity. These are poems highly aware of their own internal movements, pockets of self-reference arise, and the broader poetic practices with which they engage. It's like these poems see through us, our daily human desires, the present's chronic revision which a poem reenacts, and playfully skewer conventional writing practices that hit home sometimes uncomfortably, as in Make It New, which says, "And someone will have set down a diner or a gas station at a desolate crossroads and tried naming it to evoke the whole human situation, while satirizing the impulse to do so." Rae Armantrout's work has appeared in many anthologies, including, there's many to name, but some include language poetries, postmodern American poetry from the other side of the century, American woman poets in the 21st century, where language meets lyric, the Oxford Book of American Poetry, and the Best American Poetry, repeatedly. Itself, published by Wesleyan University Press in 2015, is her 12th and most recent book of poetry. Previous titles include Just Saying and Money Shot, as well as Versed, which I mentioned. She is also the author of the memoir True, co-author of The Grand Piano, an experiment in collective autobiography, and a volume of collected prose. She was an undergraduate here at Berkeley, as probably many of you also know, and is now a professor of writing and literature at the University of California, San Diego. All of these facts or poses, any attempt at closing off this introduction, seem a little inadequate. As Rae Armantrout herself has said in an interview, we never arrive at a final synthesis. The dissonances and consonances will keep coming as long as we're alive, thinking, reading, and writing. So I'll just stop here. Please join me in welcoming Rae Armantrout.
Thank you. Lise, is that your name? Yeah. Thank you. That was great. Covered a lot of my book, so I hope I don't set this off either. It's going to be too hard. All right, so I'm going to start reading some of itself. The first couple of poems sort of bounce off of scientific concepts. The first one's called chirality, and you probably have some idea what chirality is, as it at least was explained by Walter White in Breaking Bad. It has to do with mirror image molecules, at least that's one meaning of it, that are the same shape but can't be mapped over each other, as he did the thing with the hands. So it has to do with orientation in space. It has a slightly different meaning in physics, but I don't know what it has to do with this poem, really, but it's the title. Chirality. If I didn't need to do anything, would I? Would I oscillate in 2 or 3 dimensions? Would I summon a beholder and change chirality for him? A massless particle passes through the void with no resistance. Ask what it means to pass through the void. Ask how it differs from not passing. Conclusion. A man is upset for many years because he's heard that information is destroyed in a black hole. Question. What does this man mean by information? The example given is of a cry for help. But this is accompanied by the image of a toy spaceship, upended, and is thus not to be taken seriously. The man recovers his peace of mind when he ceases to believe in passing through, when he becomes convinced that the lost information is splattered on the event horizon. The detective is the new mime. She acts out understanding the way a mime climbs an invisible wall. It's because our senses are so poor that, on CSI, the investigators stand stock still, boulders in a stream, while a crowd pours around them. They pan in slow motion, reminding us of cameras, then focus with inhuman clarity on the pattern of cracks in a wall. God's fractal stammer pleasures us again. Eden. About can mean near or nearly. A book can be about something, or I can be about to do a thing and then refrain. To refrain is to stop yourself. A refrain is a repeated phrase. This table is an antique from the early machine age. The indented circle within a circle motif, which appears at 3-inch intervals around the base, may be a nod to craftsmanship, or maybe a summary dismissal of same. It is charming in its mute simplicity. People will ask, why should we care about this unattractive character? Despite the fact that turning yourself into an admirable character has been considered gauche for as long as I can recall. The word transparent is often affixed to such efforts, while the mystification surrounding the unflattering self-portrait at least provides some cover. Now someone will say, you don't need cover unless you're standing naked at a window shouting, look up here. This poem requires a little bit of explanation. I was invited, maybe some of you were too, I think some of you were, to contribute to an anthology called The Sonnets, in which poets were to rewrite a sonnet of Shakespeare. And so my first response was, you gotta be kidding, really? But then they assigned me Sonnet 3, which is not one of the most famous ones. And when I read it, it just seemed so peculiar to me, the whole psychology of it. I guess if you know Shakespeare well, you're used to this, but the whole early sonnet sequence is addressed to an attractive young man, and basically, at least in this poem, is telling the young man that he ought to get married and have kids because he's just so attractive. But the whole psychology of that seems so convoluted. I mean, it seems like the most sort of bizarre come on in the world. Or maybe it's not a come on, maybe he's working for a patron who would like the young man to have children. But I just kind of combined those two possible motives into a rather blunt and probably perverse poem. Oh, definitely. Sonnet 3. Your dad told me to tell you how good you look to him right now. Check yourself out. I'm sure you do. You're a very pretty boy. But the thing is, that won't last. Have you ever seen a pert old man? An insouciant septuagenarian? I thought not. They're invisible. And you'll be invisible too. What will your dad have to look at then? Do you think growth rebounds each year? Wrong. It has to be outsourced, sublet. Get with the program. Your dad will be watching. Creepy. And then, this is one of the poems that was quoted in the introduction. Itself. I work it until sweetness rises of itself, then arcs across, unfurling petals, and is gone. On television, hundreds of albino crabs scuffle over one steam vent. I know you're dreaming things I haven't dreamed, wouldn't, but that's part of your costume, like your extra appendages. Headlong. As one may be relieved by the myriad marigold faces held aloft beside the freeway, their articulation, and too by the rush of notes following their own likenesses in these headlong phrases. Relieved of what? Relieved of what? Believing. When did you first learn that the bursts of color and sound were intended for you? When did you unlearn this? Believing yourself to have a secret identity can be a sign of madness. On the other hand, the lack of a secret identity can lead to depression. Many have found it useful to lie down as men, believing themselves to be little girls, or as girls, believing themselves to be mermaids stranded in their own bodies. And this one kind of has two speakers that alternate. Control. We are learning to control our thoughts, to set obtrusive thoughts aside. It takes an American to do really big things. Often I have no thoughts to push against. It's lonely in a song about outer space. When I don't have any thoughts, I want one. A close-up reveals that she has chosen a plastic soap dish in the shape of a giant sea turtle. Can a thought truly be mine if I am not currently thinking it? There are two sides to any argument, one arm in each sleeve. Maybe I am always meditating, if by that you mean searching for a perfect stranger. Holiday. The ad for the American Moment says, "Make today famous." That little nobody? Bury her under the foundation. Rome did. Have her wear that seasonal, affective collapse getup. Keep an eye in the sky on it. The new zombie. I stare at a faint, spinning disc in the black, endlessly, ready to pounce. I actually say I'm so sick of zombies. Viral relics in the genome, genes that switch themselves off and on, unthinking but coordinated. Zombie surf it, half off zombie, the best zombie imitation, invisible zombie hand. Expression. Give me your spurt of verbs, your welter of pronouns desiring to be spread, bulge-eyed, clear-bodied brine shrimp bobbing to the surface. I prefer the hermit trundling off in someone else's exoskeleton, but we all come down to self-love which, like a virus, has no love and has no self. New way. We punch our secret code onto the image of the Earth as seen from space. We earmark trauma. Looked at in a new way, trauma is looked at from upside down. Nothing has happened yet. Just put words down, one after the last. Just get out in time of there. All right, and now, I don't know how much time has gone by, but now I'm going to read a few new poems, newer. Word problems. If a fat man with one earlobe distended by a large ring and a thin man in a heavy neck chain sit together checking email, the real is made up of things minus appearance. Near eucalyptus strands of green crescents and their shadows, flighty half-moons, while the soul is made up of appearance minus things. And this is called The Ether, but it's a different poem than the poem that was quoted in the intro, so I guess I wrote two at that time. That can happen. The Ether. We're out past the end game where things get fuzzy, less thingy, though in past times we practiced precision, concrete as a slot machine. But to be precise, you need to stop a moment, which turns out to be impracticable, and besides, speed is of the essence. Don't worry, love can take care of itself, and it's fine to say essence, now that it's understood to mean ether, a kind of filler made either of inattention or absorption somewhere near the Planck length. And I wrote this in New York at a time when all of the ads on the top of taxi cabs seemed to have this ad for something called the Gentleman's Club, which was a strip club. And the model's face that was used just had the strangest expression, I thought, and so I kept trying to say, to myself, what is that expression? And it took me a while to kind of get to it, so that led to this. Easily. The models in the Gentleman's Club ad are posed with pink mouths slack, eyes narrowed to slits. Show me stunned resentment. The way the world absorbs an insult, it won't easily forget. And this was actually sort of an ekphrastic poem, as they say. That is, it was written in a response to an artwork that I was just kind of presented with, and if I wrote something about one of these artworks, it could be in a show in the Guggenheim, so I thought, well, I'd like to do that. But I never know what I'm going to be able to write or what I'm going to want to write about. And if I give myself a topic, it just seems to doom me, so I just put the art aside, and Then I started writing something, and then I realized that it could have some resonance with the artwork, so then I started looking at it. The artwork was a sculpture by Powell Altheimer, and it's a sculpture of what looks kind of like a mummy, sort of, except that they're all doing ordinary life tasks, and the wrappings are sort of coming off, and anyway, so, life's work. Did I say I was a creature of habit? I meant the opposite. I meant behavior is a pile of clothes I might or might not wear. Before all the sowing and reaping could go on for centuries, before the calendar, I must have been convinced that my movements were both mandated and blessed. I've never been an old woman knitting by a fire, but I've played one in images where it meant being foolish or wise, a mistress of distractions in direction. To rock while entwining is life's work, but I am reckless, restless. Too true. And this is a kind of elegy to someone who's still alive, just thinking about what it would be like to miss him. Before, would my life be like a letter to you then? We never wrote letters. I'm passing the signs we slipped by together. There goes soda and swine. That name is funny because it's a joke we shared about alliteration, right? If I can describe the feeling of your absence precisely, which means using the names of things, buds blacken against blanched light, as ever. St. Didacus's bells ditty reminds us of itself, something old and automated, dividing before from now, again and again, these two, for a moment, still similar. And then this one is a little bit science-inflected again. I know an astrophysicist, slightly know him at UCSD, and so there was a conversation with him, got this poem started. Making. What made this happen, you ask every time, as if compulsion itself were mandatory? The way light travels at the speed of light, because it must? It is in no sense essential that this crown of leaves, sifted by wind, as if turning over some problem, is a gray-green, brightening into rust red at the tips, or that its equivocations fill this instant to the brim, while light has caught up to itself again and only seems to be making time. And this is called the craft talk. So sometimes I get invited or compelled or whatever to do craft talks. And I'm always pretty ambivalent about that, because even though I can think of things to say about writing poetry that I sort of believe, I never entirely believe them. I have the same problem when I'm teaching. So I decided to kind of work with that and do a kind of semi-mock craft talk, which I also kind of mean. So anyway, the craft talk. So that the best thing you could do, it seemed, was climb inside the machine that was language and feel what it wanted or was capable of doing at any point, steering only occasionally. The best thing was to let the language speak its piece while standing inside it. Not like a knight in armor, exactly. Not like a mascot in a chicken suit. The best thing was to create in the reader or listener an uncertainty as to where the voice she heard was coming from, so as to frighten her a little. Why should I want to frighten her? Speech acts. Something's going around. The crows started it. No language can tell us which crow. You who in the mama turnpike, sexy, tough shit, steady state, thought bubble, song, churn. What's new? Presence as fad. Humans photobomb the planet, pop up everywhere because incongruous is funny, and we want you to know. Conflation. As a tree is concerted atmosphere, each one a certain ambiance, drawn in and held until it turns green. You go on drawing energy from conflation, referring to yourself while implicating other beings. That's silly. Silly tablecloth of the nasturtium leaf, flung out on its too thin stem, perfectly flat, in flight, serene. This one is kind of new. Object permanence. What if the ability to capture emblems in the wild won't validate us? What if displaying our embarrassing flaws won't save us? Say being dead, but kittenish. I can't show you anything new, not even an empty room behind a velvet rope. Least of all that. There's a Lexus spinning in a parking lot because a mountain road is so cliche. It's throwing up dust, then more, but you know the car's still in there somewhere, still voguing. And then this one is also somewhat science-inflected. I was reading, or trying to read, I got about halfway through it, a book about the way that some living systems, like plants in the production of chlorophyll, use aspects of quantum mechanics. So anyway, the emotional life of plants. An exciton consists of the escaped negative electron and the positive hole it left behind. This binary system is unstable and must be transported quickly to the processing center, which in practice means the exciton must be left strictly alone, so that it travels always at once, going nowhere, but also going directly to the factory floor. Leaving aside the question of what it means for a positive whole to be left behind, and also to travel as half of a system, this happens because nothing can be still, and because, for the lonely, direction is meaningless. Negotiations. The best part is when we're tired of it all in the same degree. A fatigue we imagine to be temporary, and we lie near each other, toes touching. What's done is done, we don't say, to begin our transaction, each letting go of something without really bringing it to mind, until we're lighter, sicker, older, and a current runs between us where our toes touch. It feels unconditional. Remember this, we don't say. The little mermaid was able to absorb her tail, refashion it to form legs. This meant that everything's negotiable, and that everything is played out in advance, in secret. I got one or two lines from this poem from a poem of H.D.'s that I happened to read. And it also kind of just deals with the stuff she often, sort of thing that she often wrote about. Vessels for H.D. Hopeful vessels, a few petals, thrown up overnight, fragile, amber flutes, the sun's grail cups were not meant. Beauty, you've sexted me too often. Your pert leaves coming to a fine point at the glass stop at nothing. If we hear the same sequence twice, then someone's flaunting inner logic. But the wind loose in copper chimes is now far more. And this one is a kind of a takeoff on a Williams poem. I mean, a lot of people know I really learned a lot from Williams and love Williams, but he's got a poem called, I think, The Widow's Lament in Springtime. It sort of irritates me, I don't know. And so it begins, it's about a widow who now wants to die because her husband's dead, but it starts out, sorrow is my own yard. So I just started out kind of like that. Old woman's lament in autumn. Sorrow is my corner store, where jack-o'-lantern balloons get high on the last helium. The end cap is gold today, with numbered bags of Werther's originals. No one is Werther. Last night a newscaster mentioned an elderly victim. Don't call me that. I'm old and obdurate. Distinguish, big difference. While you were out, they built Kensington Commons. You thought princess, sheep, little Bo Peep, ha ha, but there was no room left for such thoughts. Would you like the ability to add a location to your tweets? When you came to, commons meant condos and distinguished living. You said, my own being grows faint and fades away. Said it as if speech prevented what is said from taking place. Then said it amazed that own and being could have been joined in that way. All right, just like 4 more, I guess. Rankings. Screw smug survivors talking about us as if we weren't quite here. We never really loved them. And screw time, which pancakes things, but also makes distinctions. We have time to watch versions, then parodies, and rank them, to play pin the tail on the apocalypse, and define our terms. To engulf is to cover or surround. A gulf is a chasm. Fusion. When we recognize, we think again, without knowing what or if we thought before. I confuse copper with brass. To recognize is almost always a pleasure. Perhaps it is pleasure itself. I confuse Melissa with Melissa. To recognize is not only to give something a name, but to give it the very name that was waiting for it somewhere, as if thing and name had been sad without each other. That's a woman in an Arctic fox costume, singing, "Don't you worry about a thing, baby." I confuse worry with darkness in the shape of leaves flows over a building, black ellipses on the bay, slipping and falling into place. And this one is called hate. The market hates itself just as much as you hate it. Look, in this spread for leather products, a stern-faced man in pink pants and a bomber jacket stands on satin sheets in front of leopard print wallpaper holding a small briefcase or purse. The market hates you even more than you hate yourself. And just because you can't end on hate, give pause. Before we knew what pleasure meant, we were multiplying, going forth into surrounding space until all space was pain. Someone was mimicking our squawks and jerks, as if they'd been deliberate, as if to say, do that again. This was love, not mockery, so we believed. What if someone saw you in the tub, you teased, as if my house, my head, your head, was crammed with hostile relatives? Let us give pause. When one has rippled and recovered the image of the sky again, one is most oneself. Okay, that's it.
My thanks to the poets and to the introducers, to the music makers, and to Jane Gregory, and to you, the audience, for coming. Next semester, the Holloway Poetry Series will present Bernadette Mayer, Graham Faust, Frank Wilderson, and Simone White. And this evening, University Press Books is here. They have a table. There's a salesperson. There she is. Buy a book. It's almost Christmas, and I'm sure that Rae will be willing to sign some books for you. So hang out, talk to the poets, and we'll see you next semester. Thank you all for coming. Goodbye.